I'll introduce Bob. Bob Russell, farmer, flyer, business owner. Esperance Air, or S-Air was the name of the company. Went to fly at the Maylands Aerodrome, flew tiger moths, chipmunks, you name it, he's flown it. He's going to tell you about one of his special projects. It's a dream which he's had since the 1970s, and I'd like him to tell you about how he got underway in flying and how his dream came true.
Thank you, Brian. Good afternoon, everybody. Put your hand up at the back if you can't hear me. Thank you. I only got one hand, so there must be able to hear me. Yes, I had a dream, and in Canada in '75, I stood on the hill and looked down and saw an Airtel, and thought, wouldn't it be fantastic if we could have an Airtel at Esperance, where people could fly in from the east or from Perth, stay overnight, refuel and go on the next day. And I had land in the right position to do that. But as luck would have it, and the change of governments would have it, a whole lot of different circumstances arrived to change all the thinking and what we were doing. So I'll start off from the beginning. We were farming at Corrigan. The family was farming there. I joined the Navy, and when I got out of the Navy, I got experience more in Wickeping farming. Went back to the home farm. From there we were showing stud Angus cattle and merino sheep and going like a train. And of course, when I was at Moora, I used to see the tiger moths flying up and down the coast, and I thought, I've got to do that one day. And 1951, I was smoking cigarettes in Hay Street and thought, I can't afford this and I can't afford to fly either, so I chucked the packet of cigarettes away and haven't bought any since. But went to Perth, and that's Shirley Atkins, who you see around here sometimes. She's not here today, I don't think, but that's Shirley behind the counter of the Aero Club in 51 at Maylands. That's how we fuel the tiger moths. We used to hold a chamois over the end of the pipe and pump the fuel through the chamois to filter it, to refuel it. That's my first trip into the country with Colin Hallett. When I got back, I thought of the bloke's name the other day at the Aero Club engineer said, "Oh, you were low flying, there was barley hanging in the wheels." But Colin, before that last one, we went to Corrigan, then down to Wickepin and then back to Maylands. But when we left Corrigan, we used to shout through a piece of garden hose, and I said to Colin, "Have you got the map?" And he said, "Yes," held it up, and finished with a piece of map in each hand and no map. So we followed the iron compass down to Wickepin and back to Perth. Right. Now that's AMI, that the Aero Club cunningly put a hood on so that all of your passengers could be airsick. Only a few were airsick before, but all of them got airsick with that hood on. Now that's Bill Dormady. He was working on farms around Corrigan before the war, and after the war he turned up in this. And see those legs under there? Well, they're Val Dinham's, and she's sitting down there. Val, will you show them your legs to prove it right? Okay. Now that's Tom Deering from Deering Autronics. Tom and I used to fly, and that picture's 52 years old. My son was born that day on the 18th of September 1956. So that's how old that was. And I didn't have quite the same shape then. Yep, right. That's the first trip to Esperance, 10th of March 1954. That's a neighbouring farmer from Corrigan, Sam Jacobs. And when we landed back in the paddock, the right-hand wheel threw up a stick, made a hole through the flaps. And I was terrified and had to ring Harry Beck and say, "Hey, I've got a hole in the flaps, what'll I do?" He said, "Oh, I'll stick something over it." So we got a bit of Maisie's sheet, stuck it over it, put some red roofing paint on, and I watched this all the way to Perth wondering what was going to happen. Weeks later I went back down to the Aero Club and it was still just patched up the same as I did it. That's what Esperance Airport looked like. This Esperance was made of stones, and Barwick used to have sheep on there, and of course he chased them in, so the sheep soon learnt when they heard an aeroplane coming, the sheep would all roar up there into a little pen off the runway, so that but the Americans and the local farmers did it like that during the war. I was on the council about this time and begged them to get the airport nearer to town, but they'd spent so much money on it. This is the main runway now. And poor old Bill Green came to grief just there in that paddock at the end recently, just not long ago. Very hard to explain. Yes. That's what Esperance looked like in 1954. Look at just that little town there. And that's also in 54. See, there's no breakwater. There's a breakwater out there now. Now that rock is what they blasted away to start the breakwater. That's when it's going. Some of the dredging is done, and some of these pictures aren't too good, but the next one I'll show you. That's what it's like today. That's where the rock was blasted out there, and the original breakwater was out there. Now they've built all of this. That's a recent picture, but I apologise for the quality. That's just another recent one of the town, right. And another one, just recent town ones, which is so much bigger. That's my first attempt to go down and make an airstrip. And it was about 30 or 40 miles out of Esperance. We couldn't, the tank didn't have enough endurance to get between Bowsers, so we had to carry fuel, and that's what we did with it. But I had a grader on the back of that, and Miles and Morecambe, who a lot of you must know, Miles and I were at school together, and then we learnt to fly together. And Miles was going to spread super, and I was going down to make a strip for Miles to land on the block that I just got in Esperance. Now, 30 of us met in Esperance that were interested in flying, and said, well, we've got to have an aeroplane. I had an arrangement with Harry Beck that whenever an Aero Club plane came down to Esperance, I'd be allowed to fly it, refuel it, and then, pay the Aero Club. But that wasn't good enough for us. There was only about 2 of us that had a licence, but about 30 wanted. And when it came to putting their hand in their pocket for £200, they all disappeared except for 10. And 10 of us then started a proper company called S-Air Proprietary Limited. And that was the first aeroplane and the first flight we did from Esperance up to a clearing sale at Corrigan at Curran-Cutton. And that's Sam Jacobs again, who always came with me on trips. But Sandfly was that was the early model of the 172s. That's our second aeroplane. We get 2 at once. And that's Arthur Turner. Some of you might know Arthur. Arthur was working at the Chamberlain factory as a process worker, and I heard about him, and I interviewed him for a job. I had 200 or 300 hours in my logbook, and he had 10 or 12,000 hours. Captain of Viscount, Faulty Vengeance, Spitfires. He'd done everything, and me as a rookie flying, it was just incredible. We got Arthur to Harry Smelders helped us get Arthur to be allowed to do flying training and be responsible for our flying club. I didn't mention when we started, when we got S-Air going, we had no idea the performance you had to go through to have a flying school. We just thought we'd teach people to fly. I had a lot to learn. And Ron East, who's written a book that he sells you, he's got a far bigger book on me back in the SCA. Yes, that's Tom Reimer's worked for me for 10 years, and Noonie, the dog, worked very hard too. That's me at the controls. And Arthur, as you may know, is the first casualty in Flying Doctor. He hit a freak weather hit him as he was landing at Kalgoorlie, and the sister, one of our friends from Esperance, and Arthur were all killed, and the little Aboriginal baby that was on the nurse's knee is still alive. But it was very sad. That's the last aircraft we had, Charlie Oscar Tango. That was good. I went from 65 to 85. but the other directors all vanished and it was me at the end. And I'm unique. I can lose money farming and flying simultaneously. Now that's just another one of Esperance in the 80s. It wasn't a bad picture, so I put it on. You can see the islands and so forth. And the beaches. Now, I didn't point out that the family had, the farm we had at Corrigan, the family wouldn't let me own any land, so or be part of the business, so although I was share farming, and then my father sold the farm and we came to Esperance, and they had interest in a property at the west, and he was very keen that I work as a married couple on the farm, and I wasn't very keen to just be a married couple, so I bought that little green bit. Excuse the wobble. That's the Esperance Airport out there. And then eventually I discovered that I couldn't make any money share farming with the family under their conditions, and I was fortunate enough to get that block, the first block, under the CP conditions, and start on that, and Dick was here, and that's Dick Overhall's Ringatoto, Richard's sitting here. He got his farm on the map. Then this fellow north was Halliday, he was battling, and I then leased his property and built mine up. Then the man that owned the red land here, I didn't realise at the time that he had cancer, and he came to me and said, I'll sell you my farm on the Never Never scheme, cattle and all, the whole lot, walk in and walk out, no machinery. But he was a very nice bloke, and it was a wonderful condition, and that gave me 8,000 acres all in a row right near town. And I thought I was made, but I didn't allow for Mr. Whitlam to come in. And the farming got very tough, as you might remember. The farmers all met Mr. Whitlam down in the thing. And an American offered me a lot of money for the top section, and I said to my wife, we can grab this money while it's here. And it was very profitable because I went to Esperance with a debt and was able to be very comfortable. And that left me with this land down here to do a subdivision, and that's where I was keen to have a little private airport, and it was so much nearer to town than the airport out there. Then another one of my sons came back and said, I want to go farming, Dad, and I said, oh, no problem, let's get out and get a bit of bush and do it again. So we went out and got 6,000 acres at Beaumont, but we borrowed against that, and we didn't allow for Mr. Keating to come in with the depression we had to have. And when you have $1 million debt and have to pay 22%, you become, your money bag becomes depleted. Anyhow, in the meantime, we helped engineers with a block down here on the coast, but that was a bit too wet. Now, what's the next one? Oh, now, it's this little corner down. It's that corner there that I'm talking about now. We were able eventually to sell all of the other subdivisions. I did all the fencing and everything myself, right? And this is when I bought the land from Bunny. That's the town, and this is the block that I did the airstrip on there. Now that's the beginning of the airstrip back in the 70s. And it's red like that because that's an infrared film that we took, and that's the chlorophyll in the plant. All the red shows the chlorophyll in the plant. And this wasn't too damn good for farming, better for an airport. Now we started, this is my SAS 210, we had that for 5 years, and that was taking joyrides off when it was dry. Now the next one, we didn't do any joyrides because it sunk in there. And that little bit of dirt there did that to the propeller. Oh, you've put a couple of arrows there, that's good. Yeah, just that soft dirt. You wouldn't credit it that it did that, so we didn't take any joyrides that day. Yeah, that was the clearing out of Beaumont. Now it looks terrible, doesn't it? But the trees, we left a lot of trees and had it grow up. But I put that in, and that windmill, I put it up and it was straight. It's the bloody cameras done it, mate. Now this is the airport. What happened, I was working on the airport from back in the 70s, like the airstrip, back in the 70s, and my dream was to be able to have houses around the airport. When I was in Queensland at Harvey Bay, I went to the man in charge of manufacturing the aeroplanes there, and he said, there's a group in America that had called Living With Your Plane. And so I eventually became a member of that society in America, and they kindly sent me their plans. They were really great. So with their plans, I started planning this out, and as it is today, this area is being developed. This is a future development. But to give you the idea, you drive in here, and the clubhouse, they invited me down in 8th of June to open the clubhouse. The clubhouse is owned by the Esperance Aero Club, and the 50%, and the owners of the land, there's now 5 of them. Oh, I didn't tell you that bit. When Mr. Keating put the kibosh on us, I could see I'd lose that. It was valued at about 70,000, which was a low price. And I said to 5 of my friends, I've got this dream to get an airtel or get a development here, and I want to keep it going, but the bank are getting very difficult. What about putting up 5,000 each and see if the bank will take it and leave me in as an equal owner? And they did that, and they got the lawyer approached the bank for 25,000. They said, oh yeah, we'll take that instead of 70. That's how banks operate when the Labor government get in. Any of you that vote for the Labor government have got rocks in here. Anyhow, the 5, I was chairman of this little group, 6 of us, and we went ahead then, and that got everything moving. You can drive in, and when this lot's developed, they'll be able to drive along the bottom fence, and the taxiways come from the end of the airstrip, so that each block has a taxiway on one side and a car, road on the other side, so you can drive in. And you're only crossing the taxiway there, which, it's really quite good. But this is developed, and now the others have carried on. I sold out once I moved to Myrup. I swapped my farm for building in Myrup, and I'm almost embarrassed with the money, and I don't work night and day driving tractors and doing flower-blown sheep. But it's turned out fine for me after all. Now let's go on with looking at this development. That's when we first started development. Now a little man called David Dwelling said, I want to have a house where I can fly aeroplanes. And I said, well, I've got this dream to have this development. And he said, but I want to start now. So that's his house. We went to the lawyer and we worked out a whole scheme where if the whole thing collapsed, David would get all his money back, or he'd be allowed to, take over the house. But whatever happens, he had an acre as it was developed. And Dave started. And you see this line going over there, that's the power and the telephone. 2 things. The power, I was spokesman to take power east of Esperance, and I went to see the man running it and said, look, I eventually want to have an airport here. He said, where do you want the power line to go? Out here? And he did a line on the map, and that's where it went, over in the other bloke's farm. So, but then of course once we wanted to get it on, we had to bring the underground power under the airstrip and in, and that's all done. When it came to the telephone, I used to know all the yardmen and the telephone business in Esperance and friends of them all, and I rang up and said, well, I want telephone out on Fisheries Road. And I said, Fisheries Road? And I said, where are you? She said, Tasmania. And I said, well, how the hell can you plan what we want here? Oh, we can do it better. We've got computers. We can do a better job now than the men that are on the spot. I don't agree with them. That's as we're doing it. Now this is how it is today. That's the main runway. The other runway runs over there. That one we pushed out the paper barks with a little front end loader that just about wrecked the front end loader. But that's the development now, and this is where the future development will be, and the gate is in there. That's the sign going in. That's, my farm up the top was called Myrup, and we call this Myrup Flying Estate. I went into town one night when I was still active with it, and we saw that donga. It was very cheap, and I rang the other director and said, quick, there's a donga there for, I can't remember how much, but it was really cheap. And they said, right, buy it. So the next day it was on the farm. And that was the beginning of our flying club for Esperance. Now that's the television came down from Kalgoorlie, and that's Goldfields Air Service aircraft. They did the flying training at that time. Previously we employed John Valley and Arthur Turner and all that, and they trained a lot of people to fly from the airport, Esperance Airport, but now they're doing it all off Myrup Flying Estate. Now that's the clubhouse that I went down to open, and all these people helped with various things, plumbers, electricians, everybody all went in together and built a fantastic clubhouse. It really is something special. And all these buildings are privately owned. There are now 9 hangars and 11 aircraft on there. So it's only 32 years and I'm halfway through my dream. That's Noel Willing that took the chair after me, and the quality of work that's done is really due to Noel. He is a wonderful operator. That's Jeff Spencer, another one of the owners that came in with me originally. And that's Dave Walling. And Dave is so keen, we help him with his house and so forth, and he caretakes it. He mows the grass and does everything and builds aeroplanes. Now that's Dave with his 4th aircraft he's building. I remember the first one he did had 14,000 rivets, and I had an engineer from down here there, and he said, how did you learn it? And he said, oh, I read the book. And he said he pays for high quality engineers that don't do the job as well as Dave is doing it. Yeah, that's right. They're just different views of Dave building. That's Dave's house. Now that's the only house, and I'm trying to get on to the minister lives in, the minister for, what's my word? Environment. It's 8 years since we applied to the environment people for clearance, because you can only have one house. I was on the council when I did the subdivision, and they sent me outside and they made it an agricultural subdivision. You can only have one house, but you can have whatever sheds you like. And 8 years it's gone, and one of the official letters written back to them from the environment is, what are they going to do about the mosquitoes? It's just unbelievable how they can hold it up. Now David Templeman is the minister, and he resides in Mandurah, but I haven't been able to catch up with him. This shows you the quality of workmanship that they're doing on there. This is taxiway, I think. That's the milkman's hangar. This is his fuel shed. It's not an outhouse like you have jokes about. It's his fuel shed, and he's got a lovely tiger moth in there. It shows you, information on the runways, and it also shows that they're not killing all the trees and making it all bare. That's Greg's tiger moth. It's in beautiful condition. That bore, there's 11 bores, and they're measuring the the water underground, so that they can say to the environment people, well, we're not changing the rainfall or anything by having another house. And it's as stupid as that. Okay. This is one of the local ministers of religion. His wife was there, and I said, what's that? And she said, oh, I've got to let him have a toy to play for. So I immediately thought of, Brian reminded me, in the Navy we used to call them sky pilots, and I wonder if he sings Nearer My God to Thee when he's flying. Now that's the back of the clubhouse. They've got this dish for communications. They collect the rainwater. They've got room in the hangar for an aircraft or two. They've got really good servery, and we had a real party there with barbecues and things. They've done everything to perfection. This is a water treatment plant. There's all the waste water is treated by pumping oxygen into it. It's a thing that they had to put on extra power lines to carry the load for the people doing this treatment. They've got air conditioners and all. Right, that's a bad photo that was on before of the development. Next one, quick, I don't like bad photos. That's also another bad photo of the town and sea at the back. Now that's a bit better showing you the development, but the Aero Club's out the back. This is a drive-in, town's there, and the Aero Club is out that way, and another hangar out there. It's really good development. On the south boundary, to satisfy the environment, they've kept the flowers going. I've sold my interest out to them. They generously paid me out, but invited me down to open the building. And so, yes, that's just some of the flowers that are growing down there, the typical Esperance. Thank you.